And that's all of it. Okay, two quick announcements. The first, I aired yesterday and not finishing the sugya, the last three lines where I left off, end the sugya. So I really should have kept going. So I apologize for that. The second announcement is today's Gemara is X-rated. Hence, anybody here who is under 18 is encouraged to leave because we can't do the Gemara with children present. Okay, I'll see you later. All right. So we're at the bottom of Yud Tes Amid Beis. Omer Abai. Oh, well, I'm going to go back without reading it inside. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Stam Truma Yehuda. We came out that this is now that brisa conflicts with our Mishnah, because we can by logic infer that the Gemara in Trumas, I guess it is, contradicts our Mishnah over here. So Omer Abaya, Sefer Rav Elazar Bereb Tzadok. The end of the brisa is Rav Tzadok, Desanya, and we can demonstrate that. Rav Yehuda Omer Stam Truma Yehuda Asura. Rav Elazar ben Tzadok Omer Stam Truma Begalil Asurin. So the Mefarshim have a field day with why do they insist on forcing the other Mishnah into being Rav Yehuda when it would be much easier if it was Rav Tzadok. And if you're interested in that topic, there's a long footnote. Okay, turn the page. We have heretofore learned some basic principles regarding Nidarim, Naziris, Cherims, and Shvuos. One of the principles we learned is that despite the words that come out of the guy's mouth, we have to consider what he meant. That was one concept. Another concept is that sometimes because of the way you say Shavua or a Cherim or a Neder, it's invalid. Another concept we had was we make a distinction between a Talmud Chacham, who we assume is less likely to mess up by throwing Shvuas around cavalierly, and an Am Ha'aretz who is more likely to throw Shvuas around cavalierly. So now we're going to have some cases where a very far out, but yet textually supportable machshava is claimed by the neder maker. Okay, so what's the deal? So we'll start the Mishnah. Nadar the Cherim, I declare, let's say Alan says, can I eat by you on Shabbos? And I say, I'm sorry, but I made a Cherim on myself, which means that everything in my house vis-a-vis other people is considered like hekdesh. So I can't invite Alan to lunch. Now, the truth of the matter is he comes frequently, so I'm not picking on Alan. And he gave me the list, so Alan is in my good graces today. But in any event, V'yomar, and then he says later to Alan, I was only kidding, all right? Because lo nadarti ella b'chermo shel yam. Just like the word net in English, I may own a store and I sell sporting goods. So if I say I'm going to give all my net profits to charity, do I mean all the profits of my business after expenses, or do I mean the profits I make selling tennis nets? So I could make the excuse, I meant tennis nets. I haven't sold any this week. Okay, that's exactly what we're talking about here, because cherem means a fishing net. Okay, so lo nidarti, what I was making a vow concerning, becharmo shel yam. I was talking about fishnets. Alan, please come for Shabbos lunch. I wasn't talking about everything in my house is chayrim to you. I'm talking about fishnets. All right, you got an invitation elsewhere, I hope, because we have a clouded table. Okay. Okay. What?
Rabbi Shimon would understand what.
No, anybody could say that. If I say I'm devoting my net profit, I could mean a tennis net. I don't happen to own a store. I have no tennis net. So I'm not giving anything to charity. The word net has more than one meaning. The word cherem has more than one meaning. Here, it's an excuse. But remember, one of the general principle is whatever the guy really meant is how we apply what he said. He said it. He announces after making this neder that what I really meant was I'm only talking about fishnets. So I happen to have a freshly caught fish in my house. Maybe I can't do that. That's what he said. Okay? It gets worse. Because if I say this is like a korban to me, but I don't say korban lashem. So it happens that the onkelos uses the word korban to mean a gift to a highfalutin person like the governor or the king. So the guy says, Bekorban, and then Omer, later on, he tries to clarify, Lo nidarti ella bekorbanos shel malachim. I'm talking about gifts to big shots. And that is not a restriction. There's no limitation if the king can serve it to anybody he wants. Okay, again, a guy says, I say to Alan, he says, can I come for lunch? I say, hooray, atzmi korban. I'm making myself a korban. Nothing in my house is edible by you. Or in the alternative, if I'm not saying it about anybody, maybe it could mean I'm giving my eruch if I say atzmi. But the word etzem could also mean a bone. So this guy's like a stingy guy. He doesn't like anybody coming to lunch by him. So he has a special bone on his windowsill that he swears on that bone every time somebody asks for an invitation. He has a bone to pick with me. Okay? So I don't, Uncle does. I mean, there's a source for it, meaning a present. Korban Lashem. I'm giving this animal as a gift to God. Korban Lamelech. I'm giving this diamond ring as a present to the king. Maybe he'll make me the vizier. Okay, it's a euphemism maybe for bribe. Anyway, let's go weiter. Kainem. Okay, and then the guy says, Lo nadarti ela be'etzem shabahanachti li lios nederbo. Guy admits, I have this bone on my windowsill that I make alleged nidorim on, and they don't have any meaning. Okay, and indeed, if he could get away with that, which he does, it's not a real neder. Or, this is the best one. Kainem ishti nehenes li. I make a vow that my wife will get no benefit from me. And then the guy says, you know who I was talking about? V'yomer? Lo nadarti ela beishti harishona shegerashti. I'm really talking about the lady I divorced 5 years ago. I'm not talking about my beloved new wife. So please don't go tell her I made this neder. She'll get mad at me. So now if you're following in the Art Scroll English, I think it's paragraphed wrong. The way it's paragraphed, it looks like Reb Meir says one thing and the Chachamim say the other. They actually both say pretty close to the same thing. So consider the first sentence a paragraph freestanding. Al Kulan, with regard to all of these non-real Nidorim because of the loophole of the different meanings of the given word, with regard to all of them, Ein Nishalin Lahem, they're not really Nidorim, and you do not have to go be Mataneder. Okay? That's what and that's period paragraph. Now, nishalo, if the person who says it has some doubt in his own mind and he goes and he asks a shaila, now we have Reb Meir and the Chachamim who give options, and they're really not really arguing. On Shinai son, we punish the maker of that neder, and that isn't really a neder, and machmirin aleihen, and we make him keep it, so it's a neder midrabanan. We've encountered that before. Okay?
The second wife.
Do me a favor. I don't get involved with you and your wives. All right? But we make him, to some extent, keep his vow. The Gemara will discuss what that means. Okay? Divrei Reb Meir. That's Reb Meir's opinion. Now, Reb Meir used the word onshin, punish him, which we're going to have to deal with. The Chachamim omrim, but the Chachamim say it's not a real neder, but we pretend it's a real neder midrabanan, and paischin lehem Pesach b'makam acher. We had this concept before, that we make him figure out some external rationale to have charata, and we let him off the hook, so to speak. However, on a deraisa level, on a derabanan level, melamdin son, we instruct him, we teach him, we order him to fulfill the neder. Why? Kedei shelo yehanagu kalos rosh b'nidorim, so that he doesn't start throwing around nidorim and coming up with excuses why they're not really nidorim, and the Gemara will go into the problems that can bring. So the beginning of the Gemara is why I said to paragraph the Gemara a little differently, the Mishnah a little differently. Hagufa kasha. There's an internal conflict in the Mishnah itself. Amart, first we say, Ein nishalin lahem, it's not a real neder, so the person doesn't have to keep it, and he doesn't even have to go to a chacham or a bezdin to say, I said something I shouldn't have said, please let me off the hook. That's what we say. V'hader, and then the next thing we tell you is Tanai, we teach you, Im nishalu onshinoson, or machmirin aleihem. If he does come and ask the rabbi or a bezdin to be let off the hook, number one, we punish him. And number two, we treat this neder as a chumrah, we make him keep the neder. So that's an internal contradiction. Okay? So, Omer Reb Yehuda tries to give an answer. Hachi Katani, here's what the Mishnah is teaching. V'kulon ein srichen she'ela. Everybody, the Chachamim, Reb Meir, everybody agrees that in all these nidarim, so-called nidarim, where you can say, I didn't really mean it, and point textually to a proof that you didn't really mean it, you do not have to cancel your neder with a bezdin or a Talmud Chacham. It's not a neder. However, b'medvarim amurim, what are we talking about? B'talmid chacham, somebody who knows enough halacha to understand the difference between a real netter and a fake netter. He doesn't have to ask. Okay, avo ba'am haaretz, a person who is ignorant of the nuances involved, shabo l'shoel, he is obligated to ask. Yes.
So if the Talmud Chacham is matir his own dorm, so this is what's this pshita?
Wait, it's not a neder. He can't be matir a non-neder.
They have to tell us that the Talmud Chacham doesn't need it.
Because what it's telling us is that Talmid Chacham learned this sugya, and he knew when he made it that it wasn't a real neder. On the other hand, the Am Haaretz figured out an excuse why it's no good. But in the back of his mind, he may say, maybe it is taka real. That's why he goes and asks. If he knew for sure it wasn't a neder, he wouldn't go and ask. Okay? Avabam haaretz shabo lishal, but if it is an am haaretz who comes and he asks, either at Adam Chashuv, onshin iso or machmirin alav, we punish him, and it's not or, and we are treated with like a chumrah, we make him maintain his neder. So, bishleim machmirin, I understand why we treat it like sort of like a real neder midrabanan. The law pischin le becharata. We don't want him to say, look, I regret having ever said it. Ela unshin hachidami. But how can we punish him? If it's not a real neder, we can't make him bring a korban. That only applies to a deraisa. And even with the Rabbanan, we had the concept of not to profane your word, but it's not a real neder. We can't even give him malchus mid the Rabbanan. So how can we punish him? Okay? Hey Chidami, how can we punish him? Kedesanya, we explain how to punish him in the next brisa. Mi shenazar vi over al niziruso. Plony makes a netter that I'm going to be a nazir, and then for the next 10 days, he puts grape jam on his toast. Okay, so for a block of discernible block of time, he breaks his neder. And then he says, you know what? It probably wasn't a real neder at all. I'm going to go and ask a Bezdin or a Talmud Chacham to let me off the hook. Okay? And niskakin loy. The Bezdin or the Talmud Chacham does not hear his case. They refuse to hear his case. They do not let him come and say that I have charata, until ad sheninheg bo isur biyamim shenoheg behem heter. If he drank grape juice, or he used grape jelly, or he went to a funeral during the first 10 days before he tries to cancel his neder, so we say you have to keep Nazirus for 10 days because you haven't yet canceled your neder and you haven't kept it either. So before we'll hear you, you have to keep for 10 days. If he made a 50-day and he was 40 days, we'd say you have to keep 40 days. Well, except maybe not. We'll see in a minute. Okay? Ad sheyin ha'igbo iser ki yamim shenahag behem heter. He has to make up it by being a Nazir, the block of time that he ignored his own neder. Okay? Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now, Rabbi Yossi qualifies what Rabbi Yehuda said. He's not arguing. Omer Rabbi Yossi, b'medvarim amurim, exactly where are we talking about? benazirus muetes, a short nazirus, that means 30 days. So if I do 10 days of non-compliance, I have to make up the 10 days. Aval benazirus meruba, if I say I'm going to be a nazir for 9 months or a year, then, and I do not do for a month and a half, 3 months before I find a chacham that I'll ask to let me off the hook, yom. Keeping the 30-day minimum, even though he violated longer, is enough. Okay? So that's the punishment that Reb Meir is talking about, imposing keeping his neder for a block of time before we let him off the hook. Okay, Omer of Yosef, Hoel v'amre Rabbanan ein nizkakekin loy. Since the Chachamim say the Bezdin is not allowed to hear his case, they have to dismiss it, or they have to give him what's it called? Give him a continuance until he keeps his Naziras for the block of time he did not. Okay. Beidina demaskakake. If a Bezdin does not dismiss his case, but immediately lets him off the hook without regarding the block of time he did not keep his neder, law of it shapir. That Bezdin acted improperly. Okay, so according to Rav Yosef, we adjure that Bezdin to be more careful in the future, but that's as far as we go. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omer, Mishamtin Le. We put that Chacham or we put that Bezdin in Chayrim. They violated a rule and they need to be punished for that. What? Well, you can't die because we won't bury you. You can't get married because we won't have a Masada Kedushin. A store won't sell you anything. Nobody can come within Dalit Amis of you. Nobody can talk to you. It's not a pleasant circumstance. Now, remember, we learned earlier that as soon as they express charata, whoever puts them in chayrim can take them out. So it could only be a few minutes or a few hours. But nonetheless, we tell the Bezdin that there are penalties for messing up. Okay? The rabbis seem to have said we let him off the hook by finding an external rationale to let him off the hook. If I knew Susan Podolsky was going to bake a babka, I never would have said I'm not eating a Ruvain stuff for 30 days. And so the Bezdin say, okay, you're off the hook. Tanya, we have a brisa that now, so basically, we're now going to get into a series of things that lead people into trouble. Okay, because if you make nidarim frequently, it leads you into trouble. And we imposed keeping the neder, even though it's not a valid neder, so the guy wouldn't make the mistake of doing it again. That was where we are now. So, Tana, we have a Tana who says in a brisa li'aylam al tehei ragel b'nidarim. A person should never fall into the habit of making nidarim. She'soifecha ma'ol b'shavuos, because he'll ultimately wind up making a shavua, which in some regards is more stringent than the other 3 kinds of nidarim, and he's gonna blow it, and that's a big deal because there's a specific pasuk that tells you you're not allowed to blow a shavua. Okay? And along the same lines, Al Tehei, does someone have a question? Al Tehei Ragil Eitzel Am Haaretz. You should not accustom yourself to sharing social events with someone less knowledgeable / less religious than yourself. Why? Shesoifcha la'achilacha tevolim. You'll wind up eating tevel. Now, lest you think that that does not apply today. My wife and I we try to avoid eating in other people's houses altogether. But we once asked Rabbi Yasker, can I eat by Schwartz? And he says, yeah, I eat at Schwartz. So we go to Schwartz, and she has beautiful tomatoes in this salad. This is a Maisa Shahoya. And I said, where'd you get these great tomatoes? She says, oh, I'm so proud of myself. They're Israeli tomatoes I found at Winn-Dixie. Now, tomatoes shipped from Israel are tevel. And so I kind of drayed around, what did you do about Trumas and Mises? And she said, what? So I wound up eating tevel because I ate at someone else's house. So it's not a joke and it's not theoretical. It can really happen. Al tihei ragel etzel kohen ha'ma'aretz. Don't associate with a kohen who is not knowledgeable. Shesoifcha, in the end, le'achilacha truma. He may share truma with you, and now you're chayav kares. So that's also a big deal. And now one which we all have problems with, the altarve sicha im ha'isha, do not chat with women. Okay, why? Shesoifcha, if you become overly familiar with women, lavalide niyuf, it will lead to improper behavior. All right, so those are eights. Okay, now we're going to go further. Rabbi Acha Rabbi Yeshaya Omer, he adds, Kol hatsofa b'noshim, anyone who looks at women. Now, in a second, we're going to use the word mistakel, which means stare at women. So this word really means even glance at women. You see a really pretty girl, it's a problem I have all the time. A really pretty young girl is in Century Village. I look. Not supposed to do that. Boli day of Avera. Because it could lead to improper behavior if you're always looking at girls. And now we're going even further. Kol hamistakel ba'akeva shel isha. Anyone who sort of stares at a lady's ankle. Chayavin lo banim she'enin mehugonim. He's going to have rotten kids. So the kids who go off the derech. So the Gemara asks, I'm adding these words, but the Gemara wonders exactly what's the connection between sitting on a bus and looking at the heels of the girl on the other side of the aisle and having kids who go off the derech. What's the link? So the Gemara is going to propose a couple of examples. Omer of Yosef, the Ishtonida. What we're talking about is looking at your wife's legs when she's a nida. For most of us, this is inapplicable at this point. And you may come to be Boel Nida. And now your children are born with a pagam that could express itself on them going off the derech. And Rav Shimon ben Lekesh, Reish Lekesh, goes even further. He says, you know what it means? Look at a woman's ankles. When women fold their legs under them and sit, their ankle winds up being near their erva. And that this phrase is a euphemism. Omer of Shimon ben Lekesh, Tekatane b'makam hatanufes. It's a euphemism for osay makam. because when women sit in a certain way, their ankle is by their erva. Okay, and this would mean even your own wife, even when she's not Anita. We do not look up women's skirts. That's a no-no. Okay? Shehu mikuvanin keneged ha'akev, because that place is next to the heel when the woman is sitting in a certain way.
Starts with strange women and then it goes to your wife.
Your own wife, because there are rules even regarding your own wife. Some of us are not so makpid with regard to our own wife, but the rules apply. It says, do not talk excessive, do not chat with women who are not your wife, and do not engage in excessive conversation with your wife. That's why my basic reply to my wife is yes, dear. Okay, all right. Tanya, we have a brisa. Your fear of God should be visible on your face. Okay? Zubusha. This is an expression of the embarrassment people feel when they start to do something a little bit wrong. Labilte hachatau, and the pasuk concludes, if you're embarrassed, if you show your fear of God on your face, the likelihood is you will not sin.
Laura said you shouldn't speak excessively with your wife. She's going to complain if you don't talk.
We live in our world has different mores than they did then. If you ever had a devout Hasidic friend, okay, he basically has relationships with his wife at meal times and in the bedroom. And that's basically it. When we once visited a Satmar bungalow colony, Motzei Shabbos around in the summer, so it's around 11 o'clock. All the men are at one end of the basketball court schmoozing, and all the women and kids are at the other end of the basketball court schmoozing. The men really have very little to do with their wives. And that was, Sarah, company showed up, Sarah stayed in her tent. Our standards are a little different, and therefore it's very tricky negotiating our way we live and halachic requirements. It's very tricky. Okay, we're going to get into that further in a minute. Okay, so melamed, this notion of showing embarrassment on your face can be a protective measure. Melamed shahabusha mevia lidei yirasche, that showing embarrassment when you start to slip is a way of protecting yourself, being afraid of doing something wrong. Mikan amru, based on that, simin yafa ba'adam shehi baishan. It's a very good thing if a person starts blushing, shows he's embarrassed. Okay? Acherim amrim, others say even further. Kol adam shemisbayesh lo bimhera hu chote. He will never commit a sin if he gets genuinely embarrassed when he just starts thinking about it or starts walking in the direction of the movie theater, whatever it is. Omisha ein lo boshes panim, somebody who never feels embarrassed. Biyadua, it's well known. Shelo amdu avosav al har Sinai, that his ancestors were not really present at Har Sinai. Now, that's a very stark comment. What it's really saying, Reuben and I talked about this yesterday. There are occasions, Rahmana litzlan, where someone, for either financial reasons or romantic reasons, somebody may convert to Judaism and not really mean it. Now, we have to give that person the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what's in his mind. But if you look at his children or his grandchildren or his great-grandchildren, they may not have a Yiddish hearts because that person did not genuinely convert. And that's the least obnoxious way of interpreting this. But basically, if you do not feel embarrassed when you start doing something wrong, there's something wrong with you. That's what the Gemara is telling us. Okay, now we're going to go back to looking at with.
About Busha.
No, that's not me being embarrassed. That's me embarrassing you. That's a different story. I have no right to embarrass you. If you decide to go to an R-rated movie and you're standing online with your tzitzis hanging out and your yarmulke on your head, you should be embarrassed. I have no right to challenge you the next morning in Minyan. What were you doing on that line? Number one, it means I was there too. But there is a distinction between self-chastisement and someone else publicly chastising. You could take the person privately and say, you're engaging in behavior that might be inappropriate, but you can't do it publicly. That's not a contradiction. All right? Omer Rav Yochanan ben Dahavai, he says like this. Okay, now this next piece of Gemara, if you're sensitive, cover your ears, because we're going to be talking about stuff that normally is not talked about. Arba devarim sachu li malchei hashores. The malchei hashores, I don't want to translate that, came to me in a dream and told me 4 things. Why do people become a cheger? Why do people become crippled, unable to walk? Because they turn their table over. Now that's a euphemism for shalokadarko, bia shalokadarko. If you don't know what that means, see me later. Okay? Ilmim mipnei havion. Why do people go mute? Okay? Mipnei shemenashkim al osai makom. Because they engage in oral sex. That's why they go mute. Charashim. Why do people become a cheresh, both mute and deaf? Okay. Because they say things to their partner when they're engaged in tashmish hamita. Okay. Why do people become blind? Because even their own wife, even when she's not Anita, you're not supposed to stare at Oisai Makam.
Kids would become.
No, that was before. Now we're talking, that's what'll happen to the kids. But to the guy himself, look where you're not supposed to, and God takes away the temptation. He makes you blind. Okay? So according to that, we're going to challenge just one line in the Brisa.
Talking to your wife by sex you get a worse punishment than being a homosexual.
That's above my pay grade. If you want to experiment with homosexuality, I don't want to know about it. Okay. V'raminahu, I'm going to pick on the talking to your wife part. Okay? Shiloh asked Ima Shalom. They asked a lady called Ima Shalom, who was the wife of Rav Eliezer. Okay? They asked her the following question. Mipnei ma bonayich yefifin biyoser. Why are your children so incredibly handsome and beautiful? Why are your kids gorgeous? So she answered, Amr lahen, she answered, Eina mesaper imi, my husband did not talk to me. Now we learned once before in Yevamos that this could mean have bia. Okay, we had the phrase there, talking to a woman, and the Gemara said that means bia. So my husband doesn't have bia with me. Lo betchilas halayla, velo b'soif halayla, not early in the evening, nor just before dawn. And the Mefarshim explained because there are other women on the street walking at that point, and you might look out the window and start fantasizing that that lady is your partner. So that my husband never did that. We only had bia at midnight. Okay.
Sweet.
When everybody else is not, at least not on a street, so he can't start fantasizing by having a target. Okay. And when we do have bia, megala tefach u'makasa tefach, he keeps his pajamas on, but all he does is unbutton the fly. Okay? V'daima alav kami shekafai'u shade. And he rushes through the bia like he's being pushed by a spirit, a shade. Okay? The Amarti lo. So I said to my husband, what's your rush? And me ta'am, what's the rationale that you do this only at midnight and you're so fast? So he answers, Oima li kadei shelo yiten es einai be'isha acheres. So I don't look at other women more broadly. So I don't fantasize I'm with someone else when I'm with you. Because if I pretend I'm sleeping with Rivka Schwartz, there's like a tinge of mamzerus in my children. No. We only asked that she's telling them all of this.
Why are they discussing it? Why are they talking?
Because they wanted to know why she had 12 kids and each one was more attractive than the other. Meanwhile, I got a parcel of ugly kids. So I want to know what the secret is.
Chassidim learned this. Is this the way they act?
Yeah. Not just Chassidim. That's how people are supposed to act. We'll see. Hold your horses, because you're going to get a great big heter in a minute. Okay? Heter. You can do pretty much anything you want. We'll see. All of the restricted behaviors, the bia and the oral and all that stuff, and talking to your wife, we're all going to be allowed. But let's wait our hold on. Lo kasha. So we don't have a question, a difference between saying don't talk to your wife when you're doing it and do talk to your wife when you're doing it. No kasha. Ha b'mili tashmish. One is this conversation that's related to the tashmish, and you can interpret that fairly broadly. And ha b'mili achrinaisa. You do not, in the middle of bia, ask your wife what she bought at the jewelry store this afternoon. Okay? Now, remember that on Rabbi Yochanan's list of things the angels told him he couldn't do, the first was Shelo Kedarko, right? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zu Divrei Yochanan ben Havai. That's what he said. Avo Amru, but the rabbis say, Amru Chachamim, Ein halacha ki Yochanan ben Dahavai. We do not paskin with his list of no-nos. Okay, here you go. Now you're off the hook. All right? Ella. And by the way, this phrase that I'm reading now is brought lahalacha in the Rambam. This is the din. Okay? Kol masha adam roitze lasos beishto oise. Whatever you want to do with your wife is allowed. I'll repeat that. Whatever you want to do with your wife is allowed. Mushal, and now we're going to have a weird analogy. Mushal lebasar habo beves ha-tevach, where it's analogous to meat you get fresh from the butcher. Okay? If the meat is, the halacha is you can eat meat right at the place where the animal's neck is cut, even without cooking it. All you have to do is salt it to get the blood out. Okay, and you can eat it right away before you butcher, before you check the lungs. Okay, if you want to grab a hunk of neck, put some salt on it, and eat it, isn't the hate. Sli achlo. If you want to wait a while and butcher the meat and then roast it, which you do not need to salt it because the cooking it over an open flame drains the blood, that's fine too. Mivushal, if you have the meat around for a reasonably long period of time and it starts getting tough and you have to braise it for it to be tender enough to eat, achlo, you can do that too. And shaluk, if it's really tough meat and you have to make a stew and cook it for hours and hours, achlo, you can do that too. V'chein dog haba mebeis hatziyad. And similarly, you can do anything you want with a piece of fish that comes from the fishmonger. So number one, the question is, what's with this sequence? So the Medrash talks about it's really analogous to a marriage. Early in a marriage, you're very enthusiastic and you can't stay away from each other. By the time you're married for 40 years, it's got to cook for hours before you can deal with it. And when it comes to the fish, the Medrash explains that you're going to say, yeah, but there may be some restrictions in the marital behavior, because after all, you can't eat meat with milk. So there must be some forbidden marital behaviors. That's why it mentions fish, which you can cook with milk, to tell you, if you interpret it the way I'm explaining, that there really are no holds barred, that experimental is fine. Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe they skip this sugya. I mean, let's not talk about Hasidim, okay? So man Maichli Hashores. So first of all, I didn't want to translate who the Malchei Hashores are because the Gemara is going to debate it. Who exactly are we talking about? Omer Amemar rather. Who is he talking about? Rabbanan. He can't really be talking about angels. He has to be talking about human beings. Mamash. If you're really saying he really means angels, even though Torah lo min hashamayim, even though we don't paskin from what that we learn from heaven, nonetheless, angels are more knowledgeable about sex than we are because they know all the ins and outs of making babies. The Itema Malchi Asheres Mamish, Ema Omer Rav Yochanan, why does he say? Ein halacha to Yochanan ben Dahavai. We don't paskin like this. Ha innaho BK Bitsuras Havlad Fe. They know more about the right way to make babies than people do. So if they're real angels, we really have to go by that list, and we don't. Okay. Va'amai kara lahu malchei ashores. So if we're talking about people, why does the Brisa use the term malchei hashores? Because heavy hitter rabbis, compared to the rest of us, are like angels. Okay. So now we have a machlokes. We have one rabbi say, here's a list of do nots. And the other rabbi say, if you want to experiment, get into hate. And we said that we paskin like the latter. But if you can bring me a Maisa Shahoya where they paskin, that's a brera. That's like proof to the matter. So we're going to get stories. Haho asya to kaimela Rebbe. A certain lady came to Rebbe, the author of the Mishnayos, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Omer Loi, she says to him, Rebbe, arachti lo shulchan v'chafcho. I set the table for my husband and he turned it over, meaning he wanted to do anal intercourse. So Rebbe says to her, Omer lo, Bitoy, my daughter, Torah hatirech, the Torah says you can, va'ani ma'eselech. So how can I tell you otherwise? You have to submit to your husband. Okay, and if that's not enough, Aho da'ase kaime the Rav. So now we had the top Tana, and now the very first Amira, who is also a shtickle Tana, Rav. The Amra law, the woman says to him, Rebbe, arachti lo shulchan v'hafcho. I set the table for my husband and he turned it over. Same case. Omar, he said, Maishna min ha binisa. How is that any different from cooking fish? So again, the fish analogy is a greater latitude in your sexual behavior with your wife. Okay. Now, okay, we've given you reshus with your own wife. There are really not that many restrictions other than Nida and all the panoply of rules that apply during Nida. But what about other women? So we have in Kriyishma, lo sasure acharei levavechem, don't follow your heart. Umikan Omer Rebbe, and based on that, Rebbe says, Ein yishta adam b'kos zeh v'yitain ein of b'kos acher. A man should not drink from this cup while looking at that cup. Okay, so you can interpret that. Omar Ravina explains it. Lo nitzrecha ela lafilu shtei nashav. Obviously, you're not allowed to fantasize about Farrah Fawcett. I'm pretty old. When you're with your wife. What we need to teach you is you can't fantasize about Rachel when you're with Leah. Okay? Yeah, okay. Even if we're talking about the man's own two wives. Okay? And now we're going to wrap up the, okay? Oh, Baroisi Mikem ha mardim ha poish im boy. Pasuk says, I will pick the people who rebel against me, God is talking, and those who violate the Torah. Okay, Omer Reb Levi explains this to mean, Ele b'nei tesha midos. These are children that evidence 9 character traits, negative character traits. B'nei askas Mishka. That's the 9 letters. Okay. So now we're going to spell them out. B'nai Ema, B'nai Anusa, someone who is born as the result of an interaction that the woman engages in because she's afraid of her husband, or anusa, a case of actual rape or even marital rape. I choose to interpret it. Okay, b'nai sinua, a man who has beer with his wife, even though they're in the middle of a fight, and at that moment he hates her. The children will have flaws. B'nai nidoi, a case where either the man or the woman is in nidoi, which means nobody can come within dalet amos of them, and it's pretty difficult to have intercourse if you can't get within dalet amos of your partner. So that's one of the on the list. Okay, B'nai Tamura. This is where the woman is swapped out. This is a case where you have multiple wives and you think you're with Leah, but you're really with Rivka. So now inadvertently, you're fantasizing. You don't realize it, but that's what you're doing. You're thinking you're with Leah and it's really Rivka. So, yes. And neither is this guy. We had already elsewhere. You can't intentionally do it. But nonetheless, the children are flawed. Okay? B'nai Mariva. Children who live in a household that there's constant argument, that there's no shalom bias. B'nai Shichrus. Children born when the husband is plastered when he's with his wife. B'nai Gerushas Halev, where you've made up your mind to divorce your wife, but you get one in before you go to Bezdin. The kids will come out problematic, okay? B'nai Eruvia, children of the mingling is how ArtScroll translated. What we're talking about is a promiscuous woman who has multiple partners, and we don't know who the actual father is. Those kids have a tougher road in life, okay? And now, last but not least, B'nai Chatzufa, a woman who is brazen. So obviously we're going to have to interpret that. Okay, what is that? And what it means is, the Gemara is understanding that the woman verbally asks her husband for intimacy. She's supposed to put on a cute nightie or supposed to flirt with him, but she's not supposed to brazenly say, hey, you've been neglecting me for a while. Okay, now the Gemara is going to challenge that idea. Aini is
It says before that the husband can do anything he wants with his wife.
right, but she's got to be willing.
One way, it doesn't work the other way.
There is that's correct. You have a wife. You are her Baal. But there are fine lines. If you're constantly forcing her on a one-time basis, Rebbe says, what can I do? The halacha allows that kind of behavior. Try and enjoy it. But if it's a constant, you're raping, marital rape, the household is not going to be a pleasant household.
Suppose they're in good conditions. Okay, they like each other, but the woman takes the initiative. That's no good.
Well, we'll see. She's allowed to, as I just said, we accepted that as the meaning of brazen. But now we're going to question it because Leah, who got the Teraphim and went to Yaakov, she was pretty brazen and everything came out pretty good. Yeah.
If a husband rapes his wife, can she get an abortion?
No, on a technical level, there is no such thing as marital rape. The Gemara is telling us that as a practical matter, obviously you want to treat your wife lovingly. But as a technical matter, we had earlier, if a woman makes a neder, I won't sleep with my husband anymore, you're allowed to force her. But that's a special case. We're talking here about a lifestyle where the husband is overly domineering and cuts her no slack whatsoever. And the Gemara is telling us that as a practical matter, it's going to affect the children.
Can't you get an abortion? When can you? According to halacha.
According to halacha, if the woman's life is at risk, not can or can't, you must. Okay? Now, where we have issues, one rabbi may consider mental health a factor, and another rabbi would be reluctant to consider. There are some modern rabbis who say, well, a woman says, I have 9 kids, I can't afford another, and he'll give her a heter. 9 out of 10 rabbis would not. So since rabbis come from different places, they may paskin differently in different circumstances. But the basic halacha is Jews may not get an abortion unless the life of the mother is at risk as defined, and then you must. And if you want to go further, if a non-Jew has or performs an abortion, that person min haTorah is chayav misa. But a Jew is not. All right, weiter. Okay, that's off the page. Aini, do we really say a brazen woman has rotten kids? Va'omer Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmeni Omer Rav Yonason, he quotes Rav Yonason, Kol Adam she'ishto toivasoi, any man whose wife expresses her desire for her husband, okay, Chavion lo bonim she'afilu b'dara shel Moshe Rabbeinu lo yukem. The kids will be greater than the people of the door of Har Sinai. So that's a very strong contradiction to the woman being expressing interest. And Shenemar, and I can prove it from a pasuk. Havu lehem anashim chachamim u'nevoinim. When God told Moshe to create a Sanhedrin, he said, round up a bunch of guys, 70 guys, that are both brilliant and have great understanding, both knowledgeable and understanding. Okay, Uksiv, and it says, who did he pick? The Echachas Roshei Shvatechem, he took the leaders of the Shvat, of the different tribes. Veloksiv Nevoinim. It says they're Chachamim, but it doesn't say that they would have deep understanding over there. Uksiv, on the contrary, when it came a few daros earlier, when Yisachar was the product of Leah going to Avraham, to Yaakov, what does it say there? Yisachar chaymer gerem. Yisachar was like a sturdy ox, a donkey. Okay, what does that mean? Uksiv, we have to explain that. Mibnei Yisachar yoide bina la'asim. Le'itim. They really know what's going on in the world. That they had bina. So obviously a woman can approach her husband. So how do we resolve it? Hahu demartia artsuye. That the woman should indicate by her dress and her behavior her interest, but not verbally express it. So if your wife flirts with you this evening and has an especially cute nightie on, you can take that as a signal that she was secretly listening. And I understand. I understand. But they want to resolve the two perspectives. So to cut the baby in half, they say she can flirt without expressing blatantly. Okay, so that's the end of that parak. We'll continue tomorrow. Our hope is that Rabbi Green will be back so you don't have to put up with me anymore, but we'll see what happens. Have a great day.
They said it was a mile for the women in Mitzrayim.
Yeah, well, Miriam said.